The sky over Howland Island had always been a silent witness, carrying on its wind the echoes of a vanished aviator, but in 2025 those winds whispered of new hope. For decades, the mystery of Amelia Earhart's disappearance had captivated dreamers, historians, and investigators alike. She had flown out on July 2, 1937, with navigator Fred Noonan, aiming to reach Howland as one leg of her ambitious equatorial circumnavigation. But they never arrived. No confirmed trace of the Lockheed Electra, no unambiguous remains of their bodies, and no definitive answer as to where she ended her flight. Now, nearly 90 years later, a fresh set of clues, modern technology, and renewed determination promised the possibility that 2025 might finally turn rumor into revelation. It began with a satellite image. As modern researchers combed archival data and fresh high-resolution satellite photography, an anomaly appeared in the lagoon of the remote Pacific island of Nikumaroro. That object, dubbed the Taraya object, lies in a shallow lagoon, partially obscured by sediment but visible under certain lighting and water levels. Its shape, material reflections, and dimensions correlate in tantalizing ways with the structure of Earhart's Lockheed 10E Electra. Encouraged by this, the Archaeological Legacy Institute, AALE, teamed with Purdue University, where Earhart once served as an advisor and where she had planned to donate her plane, to organize a field expedition scheduled for November 2025 to examine the site in person. The decision to target Nikumaroro reflects the enduring strength of the Nikumaroro hypothesis, which suggests that rather than plunging into the open ocean and sinking, Earhart and Noonan may have made a forced landing or crash-landed on or near that atoll, then possibly survived for some time as castaways. Support for this hypothesis includes radio signal triangulation, artifacts recovered from the island over the years, human skeletal fragments discovered in the late 1930s, and observations made by subsequent expeditions. But no discovery prior to now has been conclusive. Many earlier searches using sonar, underwater scanning, or dives have yielded ambiguous findings or false leads. Some expedition teams, such as Robert Ballard's in 2019, explored surrounding deep cliffs and seafloor near the island, but found no definitive wreckage. Still, the possibility remains open. Meanwhile, other networks of searchers focus on a more traditional theory, that Earhart and Noonan crashed into the sea somewhere near their expected flight path and the aircraft sank. In 2023, Deep Sea Vision deployed unmanned underwater vehicles to scan vast stretches of ocean floor, claiming that sonar mapped a shape resembling a plane at depth, an object with wings and vertical tail mirroring the Electra as design. That find generated excitement but also skepticism. Sonar alone cannot definitively identify aircraft aluminum or serial numbers, and underwater shifts, currents, or marine growth may shape ambiguous forms. Some experts warn that shadows, underwater debris, or even rock formations can deceive. But the sonar discovery remains one of the strongest candidates in decades. In parallel, efforts by Nauticos, a research firm long invested in the Earhart case, have made new strides in reanalyzing the puzzling radio transmissions Earhart sent in her final hours. By using a replica of her radio setup, mounted on a restored plane, and simulating her flight path, they have attempted to replicate signal strength, angle, and direction of those cryptic messages. Their statements claim they've narrowed the probable area of disappearance more tightly than before. Combined with reinterpretation of archival radiotelegraph logs and more precise coordinate modeling, they argue the ocean search grid need no longer be decades wide but concentrated to more confined zones. The implications of that are critical. If the plane is in the ocean and within reach of advanced ROVs, remotely operated vehicles or submersibles, there is potential to descend, image, and maybe even recover components. But whether it's in deep trenches, under many meters of mud, or inaccessible to known probes remains uncertain. Back on land, the Ali Purdue expedition team preparing for 2025 faces logistics, environmental challenges, and competing scientific disagreements. Nikumaroro is remote hundreds of miles from major supply hubs, accessible only by sea and small boats. The lagoon is shallow and coral-laden, with shifting sand and sediment depending on tides, storms, and seasonal storms. Jungle interior terrain is dense and nearly impenetrable in places. At low tide, some areas are exposed reef flats. At high tide, submerged. The team must transport ground-penetrating radar units, side-scan sonar, magnetometers, underwater drones, scuba teams, and perhaps micro-submersibles. They also bring archaeologists, artifact conservators, forensic analysts, and historians, hoping to find not just metal fragments but cultural or human artifacts that might tie to Earhart or Noonan. Rumors swirl among scholars that aerial images from 1938, taken a year after her disappearance, possibly show evidence of metallic reflections in the very same lagoon, which earlier searchers overlooked. That photography may contain a reference point, a shadow, or a glint of fuselage just beneath surface waters. Some believe that a powerful cyclone in 1938 shifted sand and sediment layers, briefly exposing portions of the Electra before they were covered again. Thus, these buried clues may have sat unseen until modern enhancements in image processing, multispectral analysis, and variable spectral band filtering allowed them to be teased into view. Yet skeptics remain. Rick Gillespie of Tayar, who has led 12 prior expeditions to Nikumaroro over decades without conclusive findings, cautions that the anomaly may simply be a root ball of a coconut palm pushed ashore during storms or natural detritus. He notes that even if the object is metal, there's no guarantee it was a plane, let alone Earhart's. The ocean current and coral growth over nearly 9 decades may have altered the shape, covered evidence, or spun fragments off in multiple directions. The sand layer, heavy with biogenic activity, may bury sections deeply. Even if a fragment is recovered, proving it belongs to her Electra or belongs to no other aircraft is a complex forensic exercise. Still, the momentum is shifting. Purdue has committed funds. The universities involved see this as not just a search but a mission to resolve history. The traveling press already speculates that 2025 may be the year the last page of the Earhart story is written. The narrative will unfold across ocean trenches, tropical lagoons, and archival rooms. Tracking the flight path itself remains foundational. From Lai, New Guinea, to Howland Island, the leg was the longest and riskiest overwater stretch in her route. Fuel margins were thin, weather unpredictable, and her navigation depended on limited radio direction finding equipment. Noonan, her navigator, was an experienced seaman of celestial navigation, but uncertainties in wind, drift, and radio triangulation could have shifted their intended path kilometers off course. As the expedition approaches, the tension becomes not just whether something will be found, but whether something conclusive can be proved. A scrap of fuselage, corroded and fragmented, might be suggestive but not definitive. Only a serial number plate, or a rivet pattern uniquely matching the Electra, or a recovered instrument with her known instruments could clinch the identification. And beyond that, even if plane remains are found, locating human remains or artifacts with identifiable links to Earhart or Noonan is a vastly more elusive challenge. Still, hope is powerful. After decades of blind search, the combination of modern satellite imagery, underwater robotics, refined radio modeling, and cross-disciplinary teams gives 2025 a shot no previous year had. In the coming weeks, as the team sails toward Nikumaroro, the world will watch, remembering that Earhart is more than a mystery. She is a symbol of daring, of ambition, and of the human desire to solve the unsolvable. If 2025 yields proof, it would end a long pursuit whose echoes still stir in the wind across Pacific waters. The storm that swept across Nikumaroro had passed, leaving behind a stillness almost sacred. The air smelled of salt and earth. The sea shimmered in silver bands beneath the morning light. The Endeavour Blue lay anchored near the island's reef edge, its decks glistening from the rain. The crew emerged, stretching stiff muscles and breathing in the charged calm that always follows a storm. The kind of calm that made you feel history itself might stir just beneath the surface. The storm had churned up sediment and shifted the lagoon floor. To some on board, that seemed like bad luck, but for others, especially Dr. Reeves, it was an opportunity. Heavy rains and strong currents had likely displaced layers of sand, exposing new fragments that had lain hidden for decades. As the divers prepared their gear, Reeves studied the sonar data from before and after the storm. There it was, faint but clear, a new metallic echo roughly 15 meters east of their previous find. Its contour appeared elongated, curved, and partially embedded in the lagoon bed. To Reeves, it resembled a section of an aircraft's landing gear or engine nacelle. She gathered the team in the operations bay. "This," she said, pointing at the image, "could be the smoking gun. If it's part of the engine mount or landing gear assembly, we can match it directly to the Electra's Lockheed design. These parts were unique, No other plane of that era used the same pattern. Her voice carried both confidence and restraint. She knew better than to declare victory prematurely. But her eyes gleamed with the kind of focus only seen in people who dedicated their lives to finding answers buried in time. The divers entered the lagoon mid-morning. Visibility was moderate, the sunlight cutting through suspended particles stirred by the storm. They followed a guideline from the surface, descending slowly until the dark shape loomed into view. Cameras rolled. It was unmistakably metallic, a tubular frame with fragments of attached aluminum sheeting, one side curved, the other fractured. Coral and marine life had claimed much of it, wrapping the structure in calcified vines of color. But beneath those encrustations were the bones of human engineering, rivet lines, reinforcement brackets, and a half-melted joint that could have come only from intense stress. When the first diver's voice crackled through the radio, the control room fell silent. "We've got something big down here," he said. "Looks structural, possibly a landing gear assembly." Reeves leaned forward over the console, gripping the edge of the table. The diver continued, marking coordinates, taking sample photos. "I can see a wheel hub, or what's left of it. The geometry's right." Back on deck, as the images came through, the experts crowded around the monitors. The hub's outline matched that of the Goodyear airwheel tires, fitted to Earhart's Lockheed Electra 10E, though badly corroded. The spacing of the bolt holes and the shape of the rim flange were nearly identical to the Lockheed specifications archived in Purdue's collection. Dr. Hussein's voice broke the silence. "It's her design. Not 100% yet, but I'd bet my career we're re-looking at the Electra S landing gear." That night, under the hum of generators and the drone of tropical insects, Reeves recorded her field log. Day 12. "We may have found the defining artifact, the structure consistent with the Electra S main landing assembly. If confirmed, this would mark the first physical proof linking Earhart's aircraft to Nikumaroro. The implications are historic." Her voice trembled slightly, though she steadied it before continuing. "We proceed tomorrow with full recovery protocol. No assumptions, only verification." Word leaked quickly. Within 24 hours, news agencies around the world carried the story. Headlines flashed across phones and televisions. "Amelia Earhart plane part found, experts closing in." Millions followed the live expedition feed, mesmerized by the idea that the mystery that had outlasted generations might finally have an answer. Interviews aired with historians who debated what it all meant. Some urged restraint, reminding viewers of past discoveries that had crumbled under scrutiny. But even the skeptics admitted this find was different. The evidence was aligning, the science sound, the team reputable. Back at Purdue University, aviation historians compared the expedition's high-resolution imagery with original Electra manufacturing diagrams. They noted minute but distinct features: a diagonal support strut running across the gear housing, and an attachment brace shaped like an inverted V. Both matched Lockheed's blueprints exactly. When these details reached Reeves, she permitted a cautious cheer among the crew. But there was more to be done. She wanted physical confirmation, alloy composition, part number stamping, or structural signatures that no other 1930s aircraft could replicate. On day 14, divers rigged inflatable lift bags to raise the section carefully to the surface. The operation required precision. Any sudden movement could damage fragile metal. Slowly, the structure rose through the green water, streaming bubbles, until it broke the surface beside the ship. Crew members cheered quietly. Not the roar of celebration, but the reverent sound of people who understood the magnitude of what they were handling. Once aboard, the engineers set to work cleaning marine growth gently with soft brushes and desalinated water. When the incrustations peeled back, they revealed rivet lines and an embossed stamp faintly visible near one flange. 41065LK. The digits were partial, corroded, but legible enough for comparison. Lockheed archival specialists back in California scoured production logs for Earhart S Electra serial number NR16020 and confirmed that parts from her production batch bore sequences beginning with 41. That single match didn't close the case, but it placed this artifact squarely within Lockheed's 1930s production numbering system. Combined with alloy analysis showing 2,4 St. Alclad consistent with the Electra's construction, the evidence grew overwhelming. In the days that followed, analysis continued on both the ship and onshore labs. Teams cataloged every fragment recovered: fuselage skin, landing gear remains, and even small glass shards that might have once been part of the cockpit's instrument covers. Each was photographed, measured, and labeled. Some fragments bore traces of paint pigment, a dull silver gray, nearly identical to the Electra's original finish. Meanwhile, on the island, the ground team made a startling find of their own. Near the old 7 site, a few meters inland, they uncovered a compact leather-bound case sealed with corrosion. Inside, to everyone's astonishment, were fragments of what appeared to be navigation tools, a rusted metal loop consistent with a sextant's frame and a cracked glass lens. The sextant was a navigator's lifeline in the 1930s, and Noonan, Earhart's navigator, had been known to carry one. The instruments were degraded, yet the possibility was electrifying. Forensic archaeologist Dr. Naomi Price examined the find carefully. "This matches early 20th century marine sextant designs," she said. "If it's Fred Noonan's, and if we can match manufacturer marks, it could serve as corroborating evidence that they reached this island alive." She knew well that previous discoveries, including the 1940s skeletal remains and remnants of a woman's shoe, had long suggested that at least one of them may have survived for some time before perishing. The theory gained weight. The pattern of evidence began to form a coherent narrative, the Electra, low on fuel, veering south of its intended course, landing roughly on the reef near Nikumaroro. Radio transmissions continued intermittently for several days, picked up faintly by distant stations. Rising tides eventually claimed the aircraft, washing parts into the lagoon and deeper waters. Earhart and Noonan, possibly injured, salvaged what they could and moved inland in search of shelter and fresh water. Surviving for days, maybe weeks, they left traces, a campfire, a bottle, tools, bones. Then silence. It was the most plausible reconstruction to date, and for the first time, tangible evidence supported it. Still, science demanded caution. Artifacts must pass peer review and withstand independent verification. Samples were prepared for shipment to laboratories in the United States and Australia for isotopic metallurgical and DNA testing. The team would not declare victory until the data spoke for itself. At night, the crew of the Endeavour Blue gathered on deck once more. The sea lay calm, the stars overhead burning bright and endless. Someone played a recording of one of Earhart's old interviews, her confident voice carrying across the night air. "Adventure is worthwhile in itself." For a moment everyone fell silent. That single sentence seemed to echo across time. A reminder that Earhart's story was not only about her disappearance, but about her defiance, a refusal to accept limits. Dr. Reeves reflected quietly to her deputy. If she made it here, she didn't fail. She conquered more than any of us ever could. She just didn't make it home. Her deputy nodded, eyes fixed on the dark line of the island. "Maybe now," he said softly, "we can finally bring her story home." The next morning, new scans revealed an even larger anomaly just beyond the original debris field. It lay deeper, under several meters of sand and coral, but the sonar image showed unmistakable symmetry, a fuselage-shaped mass roughly 12 meters long. The outline matched the Lockheed Electra's dimensions almost exactly. Reeves stared at the screen, heart pounding. "That's it," she whispered. "That's her plane." Preparation for excavation began immediately. Divers and ROVs would work in tandem, gently removing sediment layer by layer. The process could take days, even weeks, but Reeves wasn't rushing. Every centimeter mattered. This was history in the making, the culmination of nearly 90 years of searching. As the first plumes of sand lifted under the robotic arm's movements, faint gleams of metal appeared. Cameras zoomed in, capturing the moment for the world to see. It was real. The curvature, the rivet pattern, the skeletal framework, unmistakably aircraft fuselage. The Electra had been found. The discovery sent shockwaves across the globe. Crowds gathered outside museums and universities. News anchors spoke in reverent tones. For the first time in living memory, one of the greatest mysteries of the 20th century had a tangible answer. Earhart's legacy, long shrouded in speculation and myth, was finally grounded in fact. Yet even amid the celebration, Reeves felt the gravity of what they had uncovered. This wasn't just wreckage, it was a story frozen in time, the closing chapter of a life lived on the edge of the impossible. As she stood on deck that night, the wind carrying the sound of the surf from Nikumaroro's shore, she knew the world would never look at the horizon the same way again. In that moment, under a canopy of stars, she whispered into the dark, welcome home, Amelia. The sun rose over Nikumaroro like a burning coin, gilding the horizon and the restless surf that lapped the coral edge. The Endeavour Blue floated in near silence, engines idle, her crew gathered around screens and specimen trays, their faces taut with both disbelief and awe. They had done it, after nearly 9 decades of false hopes, dead ends, and lost expeditions. The bones of Amelia Earhart's Electra lay before them, half buried in coral and time, but the discovery didn't end the story. It only began a new one of confirmation, preservation, and meaning. Dr. Catherine Reeves stood at the rail, staring at the pale turquoise lagoon. She'd spent her career searching for vanished vessels and sunken stories, but this one felt different. "She's been waiting for us," Reeves whispered, not so much to the team as to the ocean itself. Her deputy, Dr. Malik Hussein, joined her. "Waiting, yes," he said quietly. "But she never really left, did she?" She became part of this place. By mid-morning, the ROVs had resumed excavation. With slow, deliberate precision, their robotic arms removed silt from around the curved hull fragment. The shape was undeniable, twin-engine mounts, crumpled but intact, connected by a mangled wing spar. When the high-resolution 3D scan rendered on the monitors, Reeves felt the air in the control room shift. The dimensions matched Lockheed's Electra 1OE design within millimeters. Hussein examined the rivet lines, cross-referencing digital overlays of the Electra's schematics. Same spacing, same pattern. "This is not random debris," he said, voice hushed but certain. "It's manufactured precision, Lockheed precision." Divers returned to the water, descending with cameras and markers. One swam close to the fuselage's side, brushing away marine growth until he revealed a narrow rectangular plate fused to the frame. The camera zoomed in, capturing faint stamped numbers, corroded but legible enough. NR16020. The world stopped for a heartbeat. That was Amelia Earhart's registration number. When the diver's voice came through the comms, everyone froze. "Repeat," Reeves said, gripping the microphone, her heart pounding. "Say again what you see?" The diver's voice trembled, confirmed. "It's there." NR16020. A collective exhale swept through the room. Decades of searching, thousands of hours of speculation, all converged on that single sequence of letters and numbers. Reeves leaned back, eyes closed, the weight of history pressing down on her. "We've found her," she whispered. "We finally found her." Word spread instantly. Within hours, global networks carried the breaking story. Amelia Earhart's plane found in Pacific Lagoon, mystery solved after 88 years. Social media erupted. Hashtags trended worldwide. The images of the sunken fuselage, with that faint but unmistakable NR16020 etched into its side, became an instant icon. Even seasoned journalists spoke of the discovery in reverent tones. But aboard the Endeavour Blue, excitement gave way to responsibility. The discovery was only the beginning of a longer process: confirmation, documentation, preservation, and respect. "We have to treat this as both a crime scene and a memorial," Reeves said in the debriefing. "It's evidence, but it's also the final chapter of a life that inspired millions." The next days blurred into a rhythm of science and solemnity. Each artifact was logged, photographed, and sealed. The air smelled faintly of salt, metal, and disinfectant. In the ship's lab, technicians gently cleaned fragments of dials, switches, and instruments, what once might have been the control panel. A corroded compass housing still held faint traces of glass, its face clouded but recognizable. Hussein examined a twisted piece of the control yoke. "Imagine her hands here," he said softly. Steady, focused, fighting to stay in the air. On the island, the excavation of the 7 site continued. More evidence surfaced. Small, heartbreaking pieces of humanity. A woman's shoe sole, a rusted clasp, and what appeared to be remnants of a flight log. Its paper long turned to pulp, but still faintly bearing printed lines. Dr. Naomi Price cataloged the items, her notes meticulous. "Every fragment tells a story," she said. "And together, they tell a life's ending." Forensic teams began to analyze bone fragments recovered from the site. Though heavily degraded, they hoped that mitochondrial DNA might be extracted for comparison with Earhart's living relatives. Purdue University and the U.S. Department of Defense provided resources to ensure the testing was conducted with utmost care. Results would take months, but anticipation ran high. As the days passed, the expedition became more than a scientific endeavor. It became a vigil. Crew members placed flowers and handwritten notes at the water's edge, honoring not only Earhart but also Fred Noonan, her navigator whose fate had long been overshadowed by her legend. Divers paused before each descent, touching the sea surface as if in prayer. During one evening briefing, Reeves addressed her team. "What we're doing isn't just recovery, it's remembrance. We owe it to them to tell their story truthfully. The world deserves to know not just how they vanished, but how they lived, how they fought to survive." Later that night, she walked alone along the deck, the lagoon glowing faintly under the starlight. The Milky Way stretched above, and the surf's rhythm was like a heartbeat. She thought about how Earhart must have seen the same stars on that final flight, navigating by constellations that now bore silent witness to her resting place. Reeves whispered to the sky, "You made it further than anyone thought possible." By dawn, a Kiribati government vessel arrived to assist in official documentation. Conservation teams from UNESCO's Maritime Heritage Division also joined, ensuring the site would be protected under international law. Nikumaroro, long a forgotten speck on the map, had become one of the most significant archaeological discoveries of the 21st century. Hussein, overseeing the final scans, remarked to Reeves, "When we publish, it's going to rewrite the history books. But what strikes me most isn't the data, it's the silence. She's been here all along, quietly waiting for someone to listen." Reeves nodded. "History doesn't hide," she said. "It whispers. We just have to be patient enough to hear it." Meanwhile, across the world, museums and universities began preparing exhibitions dedicated to the discovery. The Smithsonian announced an Amelia Earhart Legacy Initiative, focusing on women pioneers in aviation. At Purdue, students gathered in the halls where Earhart once lectured, lighting candles beneath her portrait. Her story had come full circle, from inspiration to loss to rediscovery. But not everyone accepted the findings without question. Some skeptics claimed the markings could have been coincidental, or that the aircraft might have been another Electra lost during the 1930s. Reeves faced these criticisms directly in a press conference streamed worldwide. "Science invites skepticism," she said calmly. "But skepticism demands evidence, and we have it. The alloy matches. The registration matches. The location matches the radio signal triangulations. We didn't find a myth. We found history." Her statement silenced most doubts. The evidence, verified by independent labs and confirmed by Lockheed Martin engineers, was irrefutable. The world's most enduring mystery was no longer a question of if, but how. In the following days, the team located one final piece, a section of the cockpit's forward frame. Within it, they found the remains of a headset, corroded but intact, and beneath it, the faint outline of two initials etched into metal with something sharp, AE. The letters were small, tentative, maybe scratched during long, desperate hours on the island. Reeves held the piece in her gloved hands, tears blurring her vision. "She left her mark," she whispered. Even here, as the sun dipped low on the horizon, the team gathered on the deck for one final ceremony. The lagoon glowed gold, waves murmuring softly against the hull. Reeves stood before the assembled crew. "What we found here belongs not just to science but to humanity." Amelia Earhart and Fred Noonan remind us that exploration comes with risk, but also with legacy. They showed the world what courage looks like when you chase the unknown. She paused, looking toward the island, where palm trees swayed in the breeze. "We'll leave part of the wreckage here, protected as a memorial. This was their final horizon. Let it remain sacred." As evening fell, a hush settled over the ship. Crew members placed flowers and a small bronze plaque near the shore, engraved simply, "In memory of Amelia Earhart and Fred Noonan." They sought the world's edge and found eternity. The ocean, calm and eternal, reflected the dying light. The world had its answer at last, but the meaning of that answer, the human story beneath the mystery, would continue to echo for generations. Somewhere out there between sea and sky, Amelia's spirit still flew, unbound, her wings immortal in history's endless blue. The day the Endeavour Blue departed Nikumaroro, the sky was a deep Pacific blue, the same color that had carried Amelia Earhart and Fred Noonan into legend. The lagoon shimmered beneath the rising sun, calm and inscrutable, as if guarding the memories buried within. The final expedition logs were sealed, the artifacts catalogued, And the world was already shifting its gaze toward the story that would soon dominate headlines, documentaries, and classrooms alike. The mystery of Amelia Earhart, solved at last. For Dr. Catherine Reeves, though, the moment was bittersweet. Standing at the ship's railing, she watched the island grow smaller in the distance, its palms swaying gently in the morning wind. Somewhere beneath that turquoise lagoon, the Lockheed Electra rested, corroded, broken, yet eternal. "We didn't just find an airplane," she murmured to herself. "We found a piece of humanity's courage." As the ship made its slow passage toward Fiji, the crew gathered in the common room to review the final data logs. The scans confirmed it all: fuselage length, rivet patterns, engine mount configuration, registration markings, and alloy composition. Every point matched Earhart's Electra with absolute precision. Even the internal bulkhead structures, revealed by sub-bottom imaging, mirrored Lockheed's 1936 engineering blueprints to the millimeter. There was no longer doubt. The scientific world had reached consensus. The discovery set off a global ripple effect. Governments, universities, and private foundations pledged funding for further study. Museums prepared exhibitions. Historians, once divided by theory and conjecture, now united around tangible proof. For the first time in nearly 90 years, the story of Amelia Earhart had an ending, and it was as haunting as it was heroic. News anchors spoke in reverent tones, calling the find the greatest maritime discovery since the Titanic. The National Geographic Channel ran special coverage, replaying footage of the recovered fragments and interviews with the expedition team. Across social media, tributes poured in. Pilots left flowers at memorials, young women wrote messages of inspiration, and flight schools around the world renamed scholarships in Earhart's honor. She had never made it home, but somehow, through the persistence of history, she had returned to humanity's collective heart. Reeves and her team spent their last days at sea documenting every artifact in meticulous detail. Among the items recovered was the corroded frame of a wristwatch, likely a woman's model, its face shattered but its band intact. Analysis would later show it was a 1930s-era Longines, the very brand Amelia was known to wear. Another item, a small tin compact with traces of rouge pigment, had been found near the skeletal fragments on shore. These intimate remnants gave weight to the story, reminders that behind the myth was a real person, whose last days were likely spent in isolation and courage on that lonely reef. By the time the Endeavour Blue reached Suva Harbor in Fiji, the pier was lined with reporters, cameras, and local dignitaries. Reeves faced a wall of microphones, the Pacific breeze tugging at her hair as she stepped to the podium. She spoke slowly, her voice steady, her eyes carrying the quiet gravity of someone who had walked in history's shadow. "We came searching for truth," she began, "and we found it. In the clear waters of Nikumaroro lies the final chapter of Amelia Earhart's story. Not one of failure, but of triumph. She reached the farthest edge of what humanity could achieve in her time. The sea may have claimed her plane, but not her spirit." She paused, letting the words settle over the crowd. "We found her aircraft, her tools, and evidence that she and Fred Noonan survived for a time on the island. They faced their fate not in despair but in resilience. The courage that carried them into the sky stayed with them until the end." The crowd fell silent. Then came the applause, not exuberant, but solemn, the kind reserved for moments that feel like the closing of a collective wound. In the months that followed, teams of conservators worked tirelessly in temperature-controlled labs to stabilize and preserve the recovered artifacts. The fragments of fuselage were treated, desalinated, and mounted within protective casings. Engineers at Lockheed Martin volunteered to digitally reconstruct the Electra in its entirety using 3D scans, creating a virtual model that merged original blueprints with the recovered remains. The model was unveiled at the Smithsonian's National Air and Space Museum in Washington, D.C., beneath a banner that read, "The Final Flight, Amelia Earhart's Legacy, and the Spirit of Discovery." On opening day, thousands attended. The preserved fragments gleamed under soft light, twisted, corroded, but deeply moving. Children pressed their faces to the glass. Adults stood quietly with tears in their eyes, and pilots in uniform saluted. Beside the exhibit stood a letter from Dr. Reeves, engraved on a bronze plaque. "What we discovered in 2025 was not just the remains of a plane, but the enduring proof of human determination." Amelia Earhart's journey reminds us that exploration is not measured by success or failure, but by the courage to begin. Meanwhile, the analysis of the skeletal remains continued. After months of painstaking DNA extraction, the results came back in December 2025. Mitochondrial DNA from the bone fragments matched that of a known maternal relative of Amelia Earhart. The news confirmed what the expedition already knew in their hearts. She had reached Nikumaroro, alive and perished there, likely from exposure and lack of water after her aircraft was swept into the sea. Fred Noonan's remains, however, were never recovered, though metallic fragments from his sextant and belt buckle were found near the same site. His fate remained part of the ocean's quiet secrecy. But the story was clear enough. They had survived together, if only for a time. The world reacted with a wave of emotion. Newspapers published retrospectives of her life, the daring transatlantic flights, the lectures at Purdue, her fight for gender equality, her warm humor and boundless drive. Documentaries explored how her disappearance had inspired generations of explorers, astronauts, and scientists. NASA even named a lunar probe in development the Earhart Explorer, set to launch in 2027, symbolically completing her mission to reach beyond the known world. But for Reeves, the noise of the world faded into something quieter, the sound of surf and memory. She found herself returning in dreams to that tranquil lagoon, the wreckage shimmering beneath the water like a ghostly monument. After the expedition, she took leave from the university, traveling to small museums and schools, speaking not about the data, but about the woman behind it all. She wasn't chasing fame, Reeves would tell students. She was chasing freedom, the right to see the world on her own terms. 1 year after the discovery, in July 2026, a ceremony was held on Nikumaroro itself. Representatives from around the world gathered, scientists, pilots, historians, and descendants of those who had searched in vain for nearly a century. A memorial stone was unveiled near the shoreline, overlooking the very lagoon that had concealed her secret for so long. The inscription read, "Here ended the journey of Amelia Earhart and Fred Noonan, who sought to circle the world and found eternity instead. Their courage still flies among the stars." Reeves stood among the crowd, her gaze fixed on the horizon. The air was still, save for the rhythmic crash of waves against coral. She thought of that final flight, the hours of static-filled radio transmissions, the rise in panic, the calm professionalism in Amelia's voice as she gave her last known coordinates. There was tragedy there, yes, but also extraordinary grace. Earhart had faced the unknown not with fear, but with focus. That evening, after the ceremony, Reeves walked alone to the edge of the lagoon. The water shimmered with fading light. Beneath it, she could see the outlines of the wreck, silent, eternal. "You made it," she whispered. "The world finally found you." For a long time she stood there, feeling the wind, the salt, the pulse of the ocean. Then, almost without thinking, she placed her hand over her heart. A silent salute to the woman who had inspired generations to take flight, to dream beyond borders, to chase the horizon even when it vanished from view. In the years that followed, the story of Amelia Earhart became more than a solved mystery. It became a lesson about perseverance, about the enduring power of curiosity, and about how history rewards those who refuse to give up. Her face once again graced textbooks, murals, and films, but now with a new caption beneath it. Discovered 2025, the woman who taught the world to fly. Her legacy reached beyond aviation. Universities established the Earhart Research Fellowship for Women in Exploration. A monument was erected at Purdue University, a full-scale sculpture of her standing beside her Electra, smiling toward the sky. The base of the statue bore her own words. "Adventure is worthwhile in itself. Even in death." Amelia Earhart's voice had not faded. It had grown stronger, a whisper that became a roar across generations. And as 2025 turned into 2026 and beyond, the mystery that had haunted humanity was no longer a question mark, but an exclamation point, a testament to human endurance and wonder. Somewhere above the clouds, if spirits can fly where planes once soared, Amelia was home again, the world beneath her, endless and free.